Hi everyone, my name is Kelya Castillo. This presentation is on my endocrine disorder, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, CAH. I hope you guys enjoy. So what is congenital adrenal hyperplasia? It is a disorder that affects the adrenal gland. So as you can see here in my little image, I have the adrenal glands that's sitting right on top of our kidneys. So their role is actually to produce several hormones that regulate many essential functions in our body. Some of the hormones produced fall into these categorizations, right? Androgens, glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and catecholamines. Congenital adrenal hyperplasia is actually caused by a lack of an enzyme that adrenal glands need to make more of these hormones. Now, the typical end result is an overproduction of androgens, such as testosterone. There are two forms of congenital adrenal hyperplasia. There's the classic form, which is the most severe, and the non-classic form. So I wanted to just go through the adrenal gland and have have a general overview and understanding of the importance of this adrenal gland, its hormones and functions, and how any changes in this can affect us clinically. So, there are two general areas in the adrenal glands. There's the medulla and the cortex, which you can see here. The cortex makes three different groups of steroid hormones. These are your mineralocorticoids, your glucocorticoids, and androgens, while the medulla makes the catecholamines, which are adrenaline and noradrenaline, or as we commonly know them, epinephrine and norepinephrine, respectively, right? So a couple of hormones that I wanted to go over is aldosterone, which is the main type of mineralocorticoid. It signals the kidneys to change the amount of salt that's released into our urine. So this balance in salt and water helps maintain our blood volume, our blood pressure, and avoids dehydration. Cortisol is a main type of glucocorticoid hormone. It helps control our metabolism, inflammation, bone health, attention, memory, reproductive function, heart rate and blood pressure, and is a very key stress response hormone and essential for growth and development of unborn babies. DHEA is an androgen, which is mostly gets converted into hormones like estrogen and testosterone, which we know well. Testosterone is an androgen, and it's the main hormone in men responsible for the male sex organ development and those secondary sex characteristics like facial hair. Adrenaline, epinephrine, noradrenaline, norepinephrine. These are our main catecholamines produced by the adrenal medulla. It's what drives our fight or flight response, right? Those that feeling that we have in any stressful environment or any dangerous environment that kicks in. This increases our breathing rate, our blood pressure, our blood flow to the heart and lungs, those critical organs that we need in order to have that fight or flight response. So yeah, kind of general overview. I find this really fascinating, and I think really understanding what these hormones do will help understand this disorder and how it affects us. So the classic form of congenital adrenal hyperplasia is due to the deficiency of 11-beta-hydroxylate, which appears to be the most common, more common than the non-classic form, should I say. It accounts for 5 to 8% of all cases of this disorder. And I actually found quite interesting this ratio here between the Moroccan Jews living in Israel and newborns in the U.S. in general. So you have this ratio of 1 in 5,000 to 7,000, right? Compared to the newborns in the U.S., which is 1 in 100,000 and 200,000 respectively. So it's a big difference, and actually I'm quite interested in knowing why exactly that is. I'm sure there's so many factors to it, but it's kind of cool. The physical effects of congenital adrenal hyperplasia, most commonly in females who have the classic form, which is the most severe, they have ambiguous genitalia, which just means that they neither resemble a female or a male, but they have normal internal reproductive organs. Any sex, however, that acquires the classic form goes through puberty at an earlier stage of their development, which can in turn inhibit their growth later on in life and can result in them being small in stature. People also tend to suffer with hypertension, again going back to those imbalances in hormones such as cortisol. Females who acquire the non-classic form of congenital adrenal hyperplasia have normal female genitalia. However, as they get older, they can develop excessive body hair growth, which is that imbalance in androgens such as testosterone and estrogen, and irregular menstruation, as well as fertility problems. Males with this form, though the non-classic form, don't exhibit much other than maybe being short. So in the 11-beta hydroxylase deficiency, it is typically caused by a mutation in the CYP11B1 gene, and this gene provides instruction for making that enzyme, the 11-beta hydroxylase, which is found in the adrenal glands, and it helps produce hormones like cortisol. Any change in this instruction can cause a lack of production or no production at all of these hormones. And when this enzyme is lacking, it actually results in a buildup of precursors for cortisol and corticosterone, and these precursors are then converted into androgens instead. And that increased production of androgens leads to those sexual abnormalities, right, in development, as well as hypertension. The non-mutated form of this gene, the one that have, no changes, this enzyme usually involves forming and breaking down of the molecules within the cells and helps produce hormones. The pituitary gland, which is another endocrine-related organ, releases adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, and this resulting cortisol helps maintain blood sugar levels, aid in the body's response to physical stress, and suppresses inflammation. Corticosteroid is then converted to aldosterone, which is the other hormone that I discussed earlier in the presentation. So congenital adrenal hyperplasia is actually an autosomal recessive disorder, which just means it's on non-sex chromosomes, hence autosomal. And both copies of the genes must have the mutation in order for an individual to be affected. So as we know, we refer to dominant genes as uppercase and recessive as lowercase. So in order for an individual to be afflicted, their genotype must be that lowercase letter. So I wanted to show some examples in regards to the inheritance pattern of my disorder based on the genotype and phenotypes of the parents. So I have a key in the lower left-hand corner, the lowercase being that recessive gene and the uppercase being the dominant one. So for scenario 1, both parents are afflicted with a genetic disorder. So because it is an autosomal recessive, both parents are afflicted, I know that the genotype for both must be lowercase h, which, as you can see, means that if both are afflicted, then 100% of their offspring will also be afflicted. For scenario 2, you have one parent is afflicted with the disorder and the second parent doesn't have the disorder nor is considered a carrier. So I know already, right, from scenario 1 that the afflicted individual must have lowercase h, right? That's the letter that I chose for mine. And the second parent is neither a carrier nor is afflicted. So I know that in order to be a carrier, they must have one of their copies must have the mutation. So that means that I know that the genotype is uppercase H, uppercase H. And as you can see, 100% of their offspring will be carriers, but they won't be afflicted by the disorder. And so this is kind of a great example of how a lot of genetic disorders can go quote unquote unseen or invisible, because they just get carried down as carriers, and you won't know unless you're afflicted. So here I have the pedigree that we worked on for one of our projects, to show that inheritance pattern again. So on the upper left-hand corner, I have my key. I have my little pink circle as a carrier and the square as afflicted individuals. I have 3 generations here. You can pause my video and look through them. But you have here one example, Rick and Mary. Rick, who is his uppercase H, so I know that he is neither afflicted nor a carrier. And then Mary, who is a carrier, she has her genotype case H, lowercase h, and you can see their resulting offspring are either carriers or are unafflicted and are not carriers. So genetic testing involves examining DNA, which can reveal changes, right, mutations in genes that cause disorders. There are about 57 clinical tests available for this disorder, and they vary in terms of whether they're for diagnosing, monitoring, screening, or assessing risk. And there's a wide array of specimen types that you can use for these tests, such as amniotic fluid, fecal swabs, serum, fetal blood, urine, etc. Most often, though, there's a lot of prenatal screening done, and this can either be done via amniocentesis or chorionic villus sampling. And as we know, I'm sure we all know, amniocentesis just involves withdrawing amniotic fluid with a needle from the womb and then examining the cells. And then chorionic villus sampling is just taking cells from the placenta itself and examining that. So as I'm sure we're all aware, that involves a lot of ethical debate. In terms of treatment, it really depends on the severity of disorder. It can be medication and or surgery. It really depends. For example, for those females that have those ambiguous genitalia, they have to actually undergo karyotyping to know the genetic sex, and then go on from there and determine, what surgical procedure has to be done to correct the genitalia. Most often for medication, though, it is a steroid supplementation. So you have to supplement those hormones that aren't being produced. Newborn screening actually in the US is mandatory for congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And then after being screened, of course, tests are done in order to determine the severity and assess the risk. And here are my references. I hope you guys enjoyed. You can look through my references if you found anything interesting at all that you want to look into. Thank you.